Time for Under 30, and today our discussion will center around Pinterest as we blend the social media world with commerce, as that's ultimately what Pinterest is trying to do. Alex Coffey, joined by Jenny Horn. And Jenny, this has been a brighter spot, I would say, for the company over the last few year and a half, 2 years, versus what it was maybe the year and a half, 2 years leading into that, as this stock at one point was up to nearly $90 a share before collapsing down to, I've seen a low, let's call it around 16 bucks. So long ways to go to get back to where it was, but having a nice day today, up 1.5%.
Yeah, and up about 10.5% this year, which is, like you said, this doesn't speak to some of its more historical strength. But Pinterest seeing some love today from Piper Sandler, highlighting actually its ad product improvements they've made. And I recently was on Pinterest. We talked about the stock enough. I had to see for myself, and I completely can understand the monetization of their ad business. To me, seems to make perfect sense. But here to tell us now more on this story and this stock is George Tillis, senior markets correspondent for the network. So George, walk us through what's driving Pinterest shares to the upside today and sort of the rest of their story now for the back half of this year.
Well, I think obviously the story today is the upgrade from Piper Sandler. They've got basically an outperform rating on a $35 price target. But if you also look, there's another analyst from HSBC, which also rates the stock higher at $32.50. And I'm starting to think that they may be onto something here for Pinterest, which I'll go back to what Alex mentioned just a moment ago. If you look at the stock, especially in the last 3 years, obviously it's down a lot from its highs, which were around $85 or $90 going back a few years. In the last 2 years, the stock has really been range bound. It's been sitting sort of in a trading range between, as Alex pointed out, about $16 on the low end, and on the high end, around $28. And effectively, there is a real business here. There is some sales for the business that has been growing, but the challenge is that sales growth is ground to a crawl. It's not necessarily the double digits that it had in the past. Now, if you look at Piper Sandler, they're actually looking for double-digit growth in both sales, but also earnings going forward into 2024 and perhaps 2025, contingent upon things like improving operating expense management, but also better monetizing their ad business. I mean, it's just really a social commerce platform, if you will. It's very unique in and of itself compared to other platforms, and they also, provide partnership, have partnerships when it comes down to advertising with companies like Amazon, for instance. That's a recent development for the business, and I think that the analysts may be onto something here, considering the stock has fallen significantly and it hasn't really done much in the past couple of years or so.
From a company execution standpoint, they've figured out how to comfortably monetize their users in a way that the source of the advertisement is welcomed by participants of this website, which is very different than many of their peers. But the issue is it's a demo issue. This skews very, very specifically to a younger and more female demographic, where a company like Meta, and particularly Instagram, seems to have cast a far greater net and is equally able to monetize that. So to me, the issue with Pinterest has never been the story about how the ads will work out. It's how do we get more people to sign into this website?
Yeah. That's the kicker. I mean, obviously they don't have the broad demographic that Meta Platforms does. I mean, as you mentioned, it's a very narrow demographic for Pinterest. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the company won't be a performer going forward. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to internally, how do you better optimize the ad spending that's going on the platform? How do you monetize it better? I think partnerships are going to be extremely important for Pinterest. And if you look at e-commerce searches, Pinterest shows up pretty much on across the board on a high percentage of total searches for people who are looking for making purchases, or doing essentially keyword searches on purchasing goods. So I think this is an interesting company. I just think that they're having some challenges monetizing the business. But again, it's all about the future. And if you look at the way the stock is trading, considering their operating losses were, about $200 million last year, it's actually trading quite well. So I think that's very telling.
Yeah, and it reinforces a lot of what you both have said, the fact that the street still really likes this name. I mean, this name still has a buy conviction on average among those analysts covering it. So while Pinterest is not moving the needle, perhaps, in terms of social media noise like a Meta Platforms, it is quietly just a more consistent performer. But we will leave it there. Really great breakdown. George Tillis, senior markets correspondent here for the network.